Canto 19. O Simon Magus, O you wretched crew who follow him, pandering for silver and gold, the things of God which should be wedded to love and righteousness. O thieves for hire, now must the trump of judgment sound your doom here in the third fosse of the rim of fire. We had already made our way across to the next grave, into that part of the bridge which hangs above the midpoint of the fosse. O sovereign wisdom, how thine art doth shine in heaven, on earth, and in the evil world. How justly doth thy power judge and assign. I saw along the walls and on the ground long rows of holes cut in the livid stone. All were cut to a size, and all were round. They seemed to be exactly the same size as those in the front of my beautiful San Giovanni built to protect the priests who come to baptize, one of which not so long since I broke open to rescue a boy who was wedged and drowning in it. Be this enough to undeceive all men. From every mouth a sinner's legs stuck out as far as the calf. The soles were all ablaze, and the joints of the legs quivered and writhed about. Withes and tethers would have snapped in their throes. As oiled things blaze upon the surface only, so did they burn from the heels to the points of their toes. Master, I said, who is that one in the fire who writhes and quivers more than all the others? From him the ruddy flames seemed to leap higher, and he to me, if you wish me to carry you down along that lower bank, you may learn from him who he is and the evil he has done. And I, what you will, I will. You are my lord, and no, I depart in nothing from your wish, and you know my mind beyond my spoken word. We moved to the fourth ridge, and turning left, my guide descended by a jagged path into the straight and perforated cleft. Thus the good master bore me down the dim and rocky slope, and did not put me down till we reached the one whose legs did penance for him. Whoever you are, sad spirit, I began, who lie here with your head below your heels and planted like a stake, speak if you can. I stood like a friar who gives the sacrament to a hired assassin, who, fixed in the hole, recalls him and delays his death a moment. Are you there already, Boniface? Are you there already, he cried. By several years the writ has lied, and all that gold and all that care. Are you already sated with the treasure for which you dared to turn on the sweet lady, and trick and pluck and bleed her at your pleasure? I stood like one caught in some raillery, not understanding what is said to him, lost for an answer to such mockery. Then Virgil said, say to him, I am not he, I am not who you think, and I replied as my good master had instructed me. The sinner's feet jerked madly, then again his voice rose, this time choked with sighs and tears, and at last said, what do you want of me then? If to know who I am drives you so fearfully that you descend the bank to ask it, know that the great mantle was once hung upon me. And in truth, I was son of the she-bears, so sly and eager to push my whelps ahead that I pursed wealth above and myself here. Beneath my head are dragged all who have gone before me in buying and selling holy office. There they cower in fissures of the stone. I too shall be plunged down when that great cheat for whom I took you comes here in his turn. Longer already have I baked my feet and been planted upside down. that he shall be before the west sends down a lawless shepherd of uglier deeds to cover him and me. He will be a new Jason of the Maccabees, and just as that king bent to his high priest's will, so shall the French king do as this one please. Maybe I cannot say I grew too brash at this point, for when he had finished speaking, I said, "Indeed, now tell me how much cash our Lord required of Peter in guarantee before he put the keys into his keeping. Surely he asked nothing but, 'Follow me.' Nor did Peter nor the others ask silver or gold of Matthias when they chose him for the place the despicable and damned apostles sold. Therefore stay as you are, this whole well fits you, and keep a good guard on the ill-won health that once made you so bold toward Charles of Anjou. And were it not that I am still constrained by the reverence I owe to the great keys you held in life, I should not have refrained from using other words and sharper still. For this avarice of yours grieves all the world, tramples the virtuous, and exalts the evil. Of such as you was the evangelist's vision when he saw she who sits upon the waters locked with the kings of earth in fornication. She was born with 7 heads and 10 enormous and shining horns, strengthened and made her glad, as long as love and virtue pleased her spouse. Gold and silver are the gods you adore, and what are you different from the idolator, save that he worships one and you a score? Ah, Constantine, what evil marked the hour, not of your conversion, but of the fee the first rich father took from you in dower. And as I sing him this tune, he began to twitch and kick both feet out wildly, as if in rage or gnawed by conscience, little matter which. And I think indeed it pleased my guide. His look was all approval as he stood beside me, intent upon each word of truth I spoke. He approached, and with both arms he lifted me, and when he had gathered me against his breast, remounted the rocky path out of the valley. Nor did he tire of holding me clasped to him until we reached the topmost point of the arch, which crosses from the 4th to the 5th rim of the pits of woe. Arrived upon the bridge, he tenderly set down the heavy burden he had been pleased to carry up that ledge, which would have been hard climbing for a goat. Here I looked down on still another moat. Canto 20. Now must I sing new griefs, and my verses strain to form the matter of the 20th canto of Canticle 1, the Canticle of Pain. My vantage point permitted a clear view of the depths of the pit below, a desolation bathed with the tears of its tormented crew, who moved about the circle of the pit at about the pace of a litany procession. Silent and weeping, they wound round and round it. And when I looked down from their faces, I saw that each of them was hideously distorted between the top of the chest and the lines of the jaw. For the face was reversed on the neck, and they came on backwards, staring backwards at their loins, for to look before them was forbidden. Someone sometime in the grip of a palsy may have been distorted so, but never to my knowledge, nor do I believe the like was ever seen. Readers, so may God grant you to understand my poem and profit from it. Ask yourself how I could check my tears when near at hand I saw the image of our humanity distorted so that the tears that burst from their eyes ran down the cleft of their buttocks. Certainly I wept. I leaned against the jagged face of a rock and wept so that my guide said, "Still? Still, like the other fools." There is no place for pity here. Who is more arrogant within his soul? Who is more impious than one who dares to sorrow at God's judgment? Lift up your eyes, lift up your eyes and see him the earth swallowed before all the Thebans at which they cried out, "Whither do you flee, Amphiaraus? Why do you leave the field?" And he fell headlong through the gaping earth to the feet of Minos, where all sin must yield. Observe how he has made a breast of his back. In life he wished to see too far before him, and now he must crab backwards round this track. And see Tiresias, who by his art succeeded in changing himself from man to woman, transforming all his limbs and all his parts. Later he had to strike the two twined serpents once again with his conjurer's wand before he could resume his manly lineaments. And there is Aruns, his back to that one's belly, the same who in the mountains of the Luni, tilled by the people of Carrara's valley, made a white marble cave his den, and there with unobstructed view observed the sea and the turning constellations year by year. And she whose unbound hair flows back to hide her breasts, which you cannot see, and who also wears all of her hairy parts on that other side, was Manto, who searched countries far and near, then settled where I was born. In that connection there is a story I would have you hear. Tiresias was her sire. After his death, Thebes, the city of Bacchus, became enslaved, and for many years she roamed about the earth. High and sweet Italy, under the Alps that shut the Tyrolean gate of Germany, there lies a lake known as Benacus round about. Through endless falls, more than 1,001, Mount Apennine, from Garda to Val Camonica, it is freshened by the waters that flow down into that lake. At its center is a place where the bishops of Brescia, Trentine, and Verona might all give benediction with equal grace. Peschiera, the beautiful fortress, strong in war against the Brescians and the Bergames, sits at the lowest point along that shore. There the waters Benacus cannot hold within its bosom, spill and form a river that winds away through pastures green and gold. But once the water gathers its full flow, it is called Mincius rather than Benacus. From there to Governo, where it joins the Po. Still, near its source, it strikes a plain, and there it slows and spreads, forming an ancient marsh which in the summer heats, pollutes the air. The terrible Virgin, passing there by chance, saw dry land at the center of the mire until devoid of all inhabitants. There, shunning all communion with mankind, she settled with the ministers of her arts, and there she lived, and there she left behind her vacant corpse. Later, the scattered men who lived nearby assembled on that spot, since it was well defended by the fen, over whose whited bones they raised the city, and for her who had chosen the place before all others, they named it with no further augury, Mantua. Far more people lived there once, before sheer madness prompted Casalodi to let Pinamont play him for a dunce. Therefore I charge you, should you ever hear other accounts of this, to let no falsehood confuse the truth which I have just made clear, and I to him, Master, within my soul your word is certainty, and any other would seem like the dead lumps of burned out coal. But tell me of those people moving down to join the rest. Are any worth my noting? For my mind keeps coming back to that alone, and he, that one whose beard spreads like a fleece over his swarthy shoulders, was an augur, In the days when so few males remained in Greece that even the cradles were all but empty of sons. He chose the time for cutting the cable at Aulis, and Calchas joined him in those divinations. He is Eurypylus. I sing him somewhere in my high tragedy. You will know the place who know the whole of it. The other there, the one beside him with the skinny shanks, was Michael Scott, who mastered every trick of magic fraud, a prince of mountebanks. See Guido Bonatti there, and see Dante, who now would be wishing he had stuck to his last, but repents too late, though he repents a plenty. And see on every hand the wretched hags who left their spinning and sewing for soothsaying and casting of spells with herbs and dolls and rags. But come, Cain with his bush of thorns appears already on the wave below Seville, above the boundary of the hemispheres. And the moon was full already yesternight, as you must well remember from the wood, for it certainly did not harm you when its light shone down upon your way before the dawn. And as he spoke to me, we traveled on. Canto 21. Thus, talking of things which my comedy does not care to sing, we passed from one arch to the next, until we stood upon its summit. There we checked our steps to study the next fosse, and the next vain lamentations of the male bog. Awesomely dark and desolate it was. As in the Venetian arsenal, the winter through there boils the sticky pitch to caulk the seams of the sea-battered bottoms when no crew can put to sea, instead of which one starts to build its ship anew. One plugs the planks which have been sprung in many foreign parts. Some hammer at a mast, some at a rib. Some make new oars, some braid and coil new lines. One patches up the mainsail, one the jib. So but by art divine and not by fire, a viscid pitch boiled in the fosse below, and coated all the bank with gluey mire. I saw the pitch, but I saw nothing in it except the enormous bubbles of its boiling, which swelled and sank like breathing through all the pit. And as I stood and stared into that sink, my master cried, "Take care," and drew me back from my exposed position on the brink. I turned like one who cannot wait to see the thing he dreads, and who in sudden fright runs while he looks, his curiosity competing with his terror. And at my back I saw a figure that came running towards us across the bridge, a demon huge and black. Ah, what a face he had, all hate and wildness, galloping so with his great wings outspread, he seemed the embodiment of all bitterness. Across each high-hunched shoulder, he had thrown one haunch of a sinner, whom he held in place with a great talon round each ankle bone. Black talons of our bridge, he began to roar. I bring you one of Santa Zita's elders. Scrub him down while I go back for more. I planted a harvest of them in that city. Everyone there is a grafter except Bonturo. Their yes is no, and no is yes for a fee. Down the sinner plunged, and at once the demon spun from the cliff. No mastiff ever sprang more eager from the leash to chase a felon. Down plunged the sinner and sank to reappear with his backside arched and his face and both his feet glued to the pitch, almost as if in prayer. But the demons under the bridge who guard that place and the sinners who are thrown to them bawled out, "You're out of bounds here for the sacred face. This is no dip in the Circio. Take your look and then get down in the pitch. And stay below unless you want a taste of a grappling hook." Then they raked him with more than 100 hooks bellowing. Here you dance below the covers, graft all you can there, no one checks your books. They dipped him down into that pitch exactly as a chef makes scullery boys dip meat in a boiler, holding it with their hooks from floating free. And the master said, "You had best not be seen by these fiends till I am ready. Crouch down here, one of these rocks will serve you as a screen. And whatever violence you see done to me, you have no cause to fear. I know these matters. I have been through this once and come back safely." With that, he walked on past the end of the bridge, and it wanted all his courage to look calm from the moment he arrived on the sixth ridge. With that same storm and fury that arouses all the house when the hounds leap at a tramp who suddenly falls to pleading where he pauses, so rushed those fiends from below, and all the pack pointed their gleaming pitchforks at my guide. But he stood fast and cried to them, "Stand back, before these hooks and grapples make too free. Send up one of your crew to hear me out. Then ask yourselves if you still care to rip me." All cried as one, "Let Malakota go." So the pack stood, and one of them came forward, saying, "What good does he think this will do?" "Do you think, Malakota," my good master said, "you would see me here having arrived this far already, safe from you and every dread, without divine will and propitious fate? Let me pass on, for it is willed in heaven that I must show another this dread state." The demon stood there on the flinty brim, so taken aback he let his pitchfork drop, then said to the others, "Take care not to harm him." "Oh, you, crouched like a cat," my guide called to me among the jagged rock piles of the bridge. "Come down to me, for now you may come safely." Hearing him, I hurried down the ledge, and the demons all pressed forward when I appeared, so that I feared they might not keep their pledge. So once I saw the Pisan infantry march out under truce from the fortress at Caprona, staring in fright at the ranks of the enemy. I pressed the whole of my body against my guide, and not for an instant did I take my eyes from those black fiends who scowled on every side. They swung their forks, saying to one another, "Shall I give him a touch in the rump?" and answering, "Sure, give him a taste to pay for his bother." But the demon who was talking to my guide turned round and cried to him, "At ease there, snatcher." And then to us, "There's no road on this side. The arch lies in all pieces in the pit. If you must go on, follow along this ridge. There's another cliff to cross by just beyond it. In just 5 hours it will be since the bridge fell 1,266 years and a day. That was the time the big quake shook all hell. I'll send a squad of my boys along that way to see if anyone's airing himself below. You can go with them. There will be no foul play." Front and center here, Grizzly and Helkin, he began to order them. "You too, Dead Dog, Curly Beard, take charge of a squad of 10. Take Grafter and Dragon Tooth along with you. Pig Tusk, Cat Claw, Cramper, and Crazy Red, keep a sharp lookout on the boiling glue as you move along, and see that these gentlemen are not molested until they reach the crag where they can find a way across the den." "In the name of heaven, master," I cried, "what sort of guides are these? Let us go on alone. If you know the way, who can trust such an escort? If you are as wary as you used to be, you surely see them grind their teeth at us and knot their beetle brows so threateningly. And I do not like this fear in you. Let them gnash and knot as they please. They menace only the sticky wretches simmering in that stew." They turned along the left bank in a line, but before they started, all of them together had stuck their pointed tongues out as a sign to their captain that they wished permission to pass, and he had made a trumpet of his ass. Canto 22. I have seen horsemen breaking camp. I have seen the beginning of the assault, the march and muster, and at times the retreat and riot I have been, where chargers trampled your land, O Aretines. I have seen columns of foragers, shocks of tourney and running of tilts. I have seen the endless lines march to bells, drums, trumpets, from far and near. I have seen them march on signals from a castle. I have seen them march with native and foreign gear, but never yet have I seen horse or foot, nor ship in range of land, nor sight of star take its direction from so low a toot. We went with the 10 fiends, savage crew, but in church with saints, with stew pots in the tavern, as the old proverb wisely bids us do. All my attention was fixed upon the pitch to observe the people who were boiling in it, and the customs and the punishments of that ditch, as dolphins surface and begin to flip their arched backs from the sea, warning the sailors to fall to and begin to secure ship. So now and then some soul, to ease his pain, showed us a glimpse of his back above the pitch, and quick as lightning disappeared again. And as at the edge of a ditch, frogs squat about, hiding their feet and bodies in the water, leaving only their muzzles sticking out, so stood the sinners in that dismal ditch. But as Curly Beard approached, only a ripple showed where they had ducked back into the pitch. I saw the dread of it, haunts me to this day. One linger a bit too long, as it sometimes happens. One frog remains when another spurts away, and Catclaw, who was nearest, ran a hook through the sinner's pitchy hair and hauled him in. He looked like an otter dripping from the brook. I knew the names of all the fiends by then. I had made a note of them at the first muster, and marching had listened and checked them over again. "Hey, Crazy Red," the crew of demons cried all together, "give him a taste of your claws, dig him open a little, off with his hide." And I then, "Master, can you find out, please, the name and history of that luckless one who has fallen into the hands of his enemies?" My guide approached that wraith from the hot tar and asked him whence he came. The wretch replied, "I was born and raised in the kingdom of Navarre. My mother placed me in service to a knight, for she had borne me to a squanderer who killed himself when he ran through his birthright. Then I became a domestic in the service of good King Thibault. There I began to graft, and I account for it in this hot crevice. And Pigtusk, who at the ends of his lower lip shot forth 2 teeth more terrible than a boar's, made the wretch feel how one of them could rip. The mouse had come among bad cats, but here Curly Beard locked arms around him, crying, "While I've got hold of him, the rest stand clear." And turning his face to my guide, "If you want to ask him anything else," he added, "ask away before the others tear him limb from limb." And my guide to the sinner, "I should like to know if among the other souls beneath the pitch are any Italians." And the wretch, "Just now I left a shade who came from parts nearby. Would I were still in the pitch with him, for then these hooks would not be giving me cause to cry." And suddenly Grafter bellowed in great heat, "We've stood enough," and he hooked the sinner's arms, and raking it, ripped off a chunk of meat. Then Dragontooth wanted to play too, reaching down for a catch at the sinner's legs, but Curlybeard wheeled round and round with a terrifying frown. And when the fiends had somewhat given ground and calmed a little, my guide without delay asked the wretch who was staring at his wound, "Who was the sinner from whom you say you made your evil-starred departure to come ashore among these fiends?" And the wretch, "It was the shade of Friar Gomita of Galura, the crooked stem of every fraud. When his master's enemies were in his hands, he won high praise from them. He took their money without case or docket and let them go. He was in all his dealings no petty bursar, but a kingly pocket. With him his endless crony in the fosse, his Don Miquel Zunk of Lagadoro. They babble about Sardinia without pause. But look, see that fiend grinning at your side. There is much more that I should like to tell you, but oh, I think he means to grate my hide. But there, grim sergeant wheeled, sensing foul play, and turning on Cramper, who seemed set to strike, ordered, "Clear off, you buzzard, clear off, I say. If either of you would like to see and hear Tuscans or Lombards," the pale sinner said, "I can lure them out of hiding if you'll stand clear and let me sit here at the edge of the ditch and get all these black talons out of sight, for while they're here no one will leave the pitch. In exchange for myself, I can fish you up as pretty a mess of souls as you like. I have only to whistle the way we do when one of us gets free." Dead Dog raised his snout as he listened to him, then shaking his head said, "Listen to the grafter spinning his tricks so he can jump from the brim. And the sticky wretch who was all treachery. Oh, I am more than tricky when there's a chance to see my friends in greater misery." Helkin, against the will of all the crew, could hold no longer. "If you jump," he said to the scheming wretch, "I won't come after you at a gallop, but like a hawk after a mouse. We'll clear the edge and hide behind the bank. Let's see if you're trickster enough for all of us." Reader, here is new game. The fiends withdrew from the bank's edge, and Dead Dog, who at first was most against it, led the savage crew. The Navarrese chose his moment carefully, and planting both his feet against the ground, he leaped, and in an instant he was free. The fiends were stung with shame, and of the lot Helkin most, who had been the cause of it, he leaped out madly bellowing, "You're caught." But little good it did him, terror pressed harder than wings. The sinner drove from sight, and the fiend in full flight had to raise his breast a duck. When the falcon dives, will disappear exactly so, all in a flash, while he returns defeated and weary up the air. Grizzly, in a rage at the sinner's flight, flew after Helkin, hoping the wraith would escape so he might find an excuse to start a fight. And as soon as the grafter sank below the pitch, Grizzly turned his talons against Helkin, locked with him claw to claw above the ditch. But Helkin was sparrowhawk enough for two, and clawed him well, and ripping one another, they plunged together into the hot stew. The heat broke up the brawl immediately, but their wings were smeared with pitch, and they could not rise. Curly Beard, upset as his company, commanded for to fly to the other coast at once with all their grapples at top speed. The fiends divided, each one to his post, some on the near edge, some along the far. They stretched their hooks out to the clotted pair, who were already cooked deep through the scar of their first burn. And turning to one side, we slipped off, leaving them thus occupied. Canto 23. Silent, apart, and unattended, we went as minor friars go when they walk abroad, one following the other. The incident recalled the fable of the mouse and the frog that Aesop tells, for compared attentively point by point, pig is no closer to hog than the one case to the other. And as one thought springs from another, so the comparison gave birth to a new concern at which I caught my breath in fear. This thought ran through my mind: these fiends, through us, have been made ridiculous and have suffered insult and injury of a kind to make them smart. Unless we take good care Now rage is added to their natural spleen. They will hunt us down as greyhounds hunt the hare. Already I felt my scalp grow tight with fear. I was staring back in terror as I said, Master, unless we find concealment here and soon. I dread the rage of the fiends. Already they are yelping on our trail. I imagine them so vividly I can hear them now. And were I a pane of leaded glass, I could not summon your outward look more instantly into myself than I do your inner thought. Your fears were mixed already with my own, with the same suggestion and the same dark look, so that of both I form one resolution. The right bank may be sloping. In that case, we may find some way down to the next pit and so escape from the imagined chase. He had not finished answering me thus when not far off, their giant wings outspread, I saw the fiends come charging after us. Seizing me instantly in his arms, my guide, like a mother wakened by a midnight noise to find a wall of flame at her bedside, who takes her child and runs, and more concerned for him than for herself, does not pause even to throw a wrap around her, raised me, turned, and down the rugged bank from the high summit flung himself down supine onto the slope which walls the upper side of the next pit. Water that turns the great wheel of a land mill never ran faster through the end of a sluice at the point nearest the paddles, as down that hill my guide and master bore me on his breast as if I were not a companion but a son. And the soles of his feet had hardly come to rest on the bed of the depth below when on the height we had just left the fiends beat their great wings, but now they gave my guide no cause for fright, for the providence that gave them the fifth pit to govern as the ministers of its will takes from their souls the power of leaving it. About us now in the depth of the pit we found a painted people, weary and defeated. Slowly, in pain, they paced it round and round. All wore great cloaks cut to as ample a size as those worn by the Benedictines of Cluny. The enormous hoods were drawn over their eyes. The outside is all dazzle, golden and fair, the inside lead, so heavy that Frederick's capes compared to these would seem light as air. Oh, weary mantle for eternity! We turned to the left again along their course, listening to their moans of misery. But they moved so slowly down that barren strip, tired by their burden, that our company was changed at every movement of the hip. And walking thus, I said, as we go on, may it please you to look about among these people for any whose name or history may be known. And one who understood Tuscan cried to us there as we hurried past, I pray you check your speed, you who run so fast through the sick air. It may be I am one who will fit your case. And at his words my master turned and said, wait now, then go with him at his own pace. I waited there and saw along that track two souls who seemed in haste to be with me, but the narrow way and their burden held them back. When they had reached me down that narrow way, they stared at me in silence and amazement, then turned to one another. I heard one say, this one seems by the motion of his throat to be alive, and if they are dead, how is it they are allowed to shed the leaden coat? And then to me, O Tuscan, come so far to the college of the sorry hypocrites, do not disdain to tell us who you are. And I was born and raised a Florentine on the green and lovely banks of Arno's waters. I go with the body that was always mine. But who are you who, sighing as you go, distill in floods of tears that drown your cheeks? What punishment is this that glitters so? These burnished robes are of thick lead, said one, and are hung on us like counterweights so heavy that we Their weary fulcrums creak and groan. Jovial friars and Bolognese were we. We were chosen jointly by your Florentines to keep the peace, an office usually held by a single man. Near the Gardingo, one still may see the sort of peace we kept. I was called Catalano, he Lotteringo. I began, O friars, your evil. And then I saw a figure crucified upon the ground by 3 great stakes, and I fell still in awe. When he saw me there, he began to puff great sighs into his beard, convulsing all his body, and Friar Catalano, following my eyes, said to me, that one nailed across the road counseled the Pharisees that it was fitting one man be tortured for the public good. Naked he lies fixed there, as you see, in the path of all who pass. There he must feel the weight of all, through all eternity. His father-in-law and the others of the council, which was a seed of wrath to all the Jews, are similarly staked for the same evil. Then I saw Virgil marvel for a while over that soul so ignominiously stretched on the cross in hell's eternal exile. Then turning, he asked the friar, if your law permit, can you tell us if somewhere along the right there is some gap in the stone wall of the pit through which we too may climb to the next brink, without the need of summoning the black angels and forcing them to raise us from this sink? He, nearer than you hope, there is a bridge that runs from the great circle of the scarp and crosses every ditch from ridge to ridge. Except that in this it is broken, but with care you can mount the ruins which lie along the slope and make a heap on the bottom. My guide stood there motionless for a while. With a dark look, at last he said, he lied about this business who spears the sinners yonder with his hook. And the friar, once at Bologna, I heard the wise discussing the devil's sins. Among them I heard that he is a liar and the father of lies. When the sinner had finished speaking, I saw the face of my sweet master darken a bit with anger. He set off at a great stride from that place, and I turned from him, that waited hypocrite, to follow in the prints of his dear feet. Canto 24. In the turning season of the youthful year, when the sun is warming his rays beneath Aquarius, and the days and nights already begin to near their perfect balance, the hoar frost copies then the image of his white sister on the ground, but the first sun wipes away the work of his pen. The peasants who lack fodder then arise and look about and see the fields all white, and hear their lambs bleat. Then they smite their thighs, go back into the house, walk here and there, pacing, fretting, wondering what to do. Then come outdoors again, and there despair falls from them when they see how the earth's face has changed in so little time, and they take their staffs and drive their lambs to feed. So in that place when I saw my guide and master's eyebrows lower, my spirits fell, and I was sorely vexed. And as quickly came the plaster to the sore, for when he had reached the ruined bridge, he stood and turned on me that sweet and open look with which he had greeted me in the dark wood. When he had paused and studied carefully the heaps of stones, he seemed to reach some plan, for he turned and opened his arms and lifted me, like one who works and calculates ahead, and is always ready for what happens next. So raising me above that dismal bed to the top of one great slab of fallen slate, he chose another, saying, climb here, but first test it to see if it will hold your weight. It was no climb for a lead-hung hypocrite, for scarcely we He light and I assisted, could crawl handhold by handhold from the pit. And were it not that the bank along this side was lower than the one down which we had slid, I at least, I will not speak for my guide, would have turned back. But as all of the vast rim of Mailbog leans toward the lowest wall, so each succeeding valley and each brim is lower than the last. We climbed the face and arrived by great exertion to the point where the last rock had fallen from its place. My lungs were pumping as if they could not stop. I thought I could not go on, and I sat exhausted the instant I had clambered to the top. Up on your feet, there is no time to tire, my master cried. The man who lies asleep will never wake in fame, and his desire and all his life drift past him like a dream, and the traces of his memory fade from time like smoke in air or ripples on a stream. Now therefore rise, control your breath, and call upon the strength of soul that wins all battles unless it sink in the gross body's fall. There is a longer ladder yet to climb. This much is not enough. If you understand me, show that you mean to profit from your time. I rose and made my breath appear more steady than it really was, and I replied, lead on as it pleases you to go. I am strong and ready. We picked our way up the cliff, a painful climb, for it was narrower, steeper, and more jagged than any we had crossed up to that time. I moved along talking to hide my faintness, when a voice that seemed unable to form words rose from the depths of the next chasm's darkness. I do not know what it said, though by then the sage had led me to the top of the next arch, but the speaker seemed in a tremendous rage. I was bending over the brim, but living eyes could not plumb to the bottom of that dark. Therefore I said, Master, let me advise that we cross over and climb down the wall, for just as I hear the voice without understanding, so I look down and make out nothing at all. I make no other answer than the act, the master said. The only fit reply to a fit request is silence and the fact. So we moved down the bridge to the stone pier that shores the end of the arch on the 8th bank, and there I saw the chasm's depths made clear. And there great coils of serpents met my sight, so hideous a mass that even now the memory makes my blood run cold with fright. Let Libya boast no longer, for though its sands breed chalidrids, jaculi, and pharians, kentriads, and two-headed amphisbaens, it never bred such a variety of vipers, no, not with all Ethiopia and all the lands that lie by the Red Sea. Amid that swarm, naked and without hope, people ran terrified, not even dreaming of a hole to hide in or of heliotrope. Their hands were bound behind the coils of serpents, which thrust their heads and tails between the loins, and bunched in the front a mass of knotted torments. One of the damned came racing round a boulder, and as he passed us, a great snake shot up and bit him where the neck joins the shoulder. No mortal pen, however fast it flashed over the page, could write down O or I as quickly as he flamed and fell in ash, and when he was dissolved into a heap upon the ground, the dust rose of itself and immediately resumed its former shape. Precisely so, philosophers declare the phoenix dies and then is born again when it approaches its 500th year. It lives on, tears of balsam and of incense. In all its life it eats no herb or grain, and nard and precious myrrh sweeten its cerements. And as a person fallen in a fit, possessed by a demon or some other seizure that fetters him without his knowing it, struggles up to his feet and blinks his eyes, still stupefied by the great agony he has just passed, and looking round him sighs. Such was the sinner when at last he rose. O power of God, how dreadful is thy will, which in its vengeance rains such fearful blows. Then my guide asked him who he was, and he answered reluctantly, not long ago I reined into this gullet from Tuscany. I am Vani Fuki, the beast, a mule among men. I chose the bestial life above the human. Savage Pistoia was my fitting den. And I to my guide detain him a bit longer and ask him what crime it was that sent him here. I knew him as a man of blood and anger. The sinner, hearing me, seemed discomforted, but he turned and fixed his eyes upon my face. With a look of dismal shame, at length he said, that you have found me out among the strife and misery of this place grieves my heart more than did that day that cut me from my life. But I am forced to answer truthfully. I am put down so low because it was I who stole the treasure from the sacristy, for which others once were blamed. But that you may find less to gloat about if you escape here, prick up your ears and listen to what I say. First Pistoia is emptied of the black, then Florence changes her party and her laws. From Valdemagra, the god of war, brings back a fiery vapor wrapped in turbid air. Then in a storm of battle at Piceno, the vapor breaks apart the mist, and there every wight shall feel his wounds anew. And I have told you this, that it may grieve you.